Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. People always ask if there was one moment when I knew my marriage was over. There was. It wasn't the divorce papers. It wasn't the lies. It wasn't even finding out about the other man. It was the sound of my wife laughing as she walked through our front door after spending the night with someone else. My name is Donald, and Bianca and I had been married for 8 years. We had moved to a quiet lakeside town a year earlier after my construction company landed several large contracts. Business was good. We had a nice house, no money problems, and what I thought was a solid marriage. At least that's what I believed. That Saturday evening, Bianca stood in front of the hallway mirror, adjusting a silver earring. "My coworker Emily is having a birthday party," she said. "The girls rented a room downtown. I'll probably be home late." I looked up from the stack of invoices spread across the dining table. "Late as in midnight, or late as in tomorrow morning?" She laughed. "Don't be dramatic." I smirked. "I'm asking because I know how your office parties usually end." She walked over, kissed my cheek, and grabbed her purse. "I'll text you. Don't wait up." "I never do." She smiled and walked out. The house stayed quiet for the rest of the night. I finished my paperwork, watched part of a baseball game, and eventually noticed it was almost 3 in the morning. Then I heard her car. A few seconds later, the front door opened. Bianca walked inside, laughing to herself like she'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. She kicked off one shoe while carrying the other in her hand. The heel had snapped clean off. "Looks like somebody had a great night," I said. "You should have come," she replied, still smiling. As she walked past me, a strong men's cologne hit me before she even reached the stairs. It definitely wasn't mine. I stood up. "Bianca." She stopped. "Yeah?" "Look at me." She turned slowly. "Where were you?" "I told you. Emily's birthday." "You smell like another man." Her smile faded for only a second before returning. "Oh, Donald." She rolled her eyes. "The bar was crowded. People hug each other. You're reading too much into it." I held her gaze. "And the broken heel?" She lifted it with a shrug. "We danced. I had fun." Something about the way she answered bothered me. Not the words, the confidence. Like she'd already rehearsed them. She walked past me, patted my shoulder, and said quietly, "You worry too much." I watched her disappear upstairs. I didn't follow her. I didn't argue. If Bianca was lying to me, I wasn't going to waste time guessing. I was going to prove it. I didn't accuse Bianca again after that night. There was no point. If someone was determined to lie, arguing only gave them more chances to get better at it. So I watched. The first thing that changed was her phone. For years, she'd leave it anywhere. Kitchen counter, coffee table, bathroom sink. Now, it never left her hand. If it buzzed while I was nearby, she'd flip it over without looking at me. If I walked into the room while she was texting, the screen went dark. Little things. But little things add up. 3 days later, she came downstairs dressed for work, fastening the buttons on a navy blazer. "I'll be late tonight," she said while pouring herself coffee. "Busy day?" She nodded. "We've got an audit. Finance is staying until everything's finished." I looked at her for a second. "What time?" "I don't know. Maybe 9. Maybe later." "All right." She kissed my cheek and headed out. That evening, I finished meeting a supplier and decided to grab dinner at a waterfront restaurant before heading home. I had barely sat down when someone called my name. "Donald?" I looked over. It was Raymond Collins, a client I'd worked with nearly 2 years earlier. We shook hands and spent a few minutes talking about work. Then, completely out of nowhere, he frowned. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Does your wife still drive that blue SUV?" I felt my stomach tighten. "Yeah. Why?" "That's what I thought." He took a sip of his drink. "Last Saturday I was staying at Harborview Inn for a fishing tournament. I could have sworn I saw her SUV in the parking lot." I kept my face calm. "Really?" "Yeah." He thought for a moment. "I even remember seeing her leave with some tall guy wearing a black leather jacket. I figured maybe it was a relative or something." I didn't answer right away. Raymond looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry if I'm mistaken." "You don't need to apologize." He nodded slowly. "I just thought you should know." We talked for another minute before I paid my bill and left. The drive home felt longer than usual. Instead of heading straight to the house, I parked near the marina and made 2 phone calls. The first was to Bianca's office. After hours, the company voicemail listed department contacts. There was no Emily in finance. The second call was to another employee I knew through one of my projects. I kept it casual. "How was Emily's birthday party last weekend?" There was a pause. Then the woman laughed. What birthday party? I thanked her and ended the call. So there was no party. No birthday, no girls' night. Just another lie. When I got home, Bianca was already there, sitting on the couch with a blanket over her legs. She looked up and smiled. Long day? It was. She patted the empty cushion beside her. Come watch a movie. I looked at her for a few seconds. She smiled like nothing had happened. Like Harborview Inn didn't exist. Like another man hadn't walked out beside her. I sat down anyway. Not because I believed her, because I wanted her to keep believing I did. 3 nights later, Bianca came home complaining about a headache. I think I'm coming down with something, she said, dropping her purse by the door. She took some cold medicine, ate a bowl of soup, and went to bed before 9. I gave it about an hour before heading upstairs. Bianca was asleep, barely moving beneath the blanket. Her phone was charging on the nightstand. For a second, I just looked at it. 8 years of marriage had taught me one thing. Once you crossed a line like this, there was no going back. I picked it up anyway. The passcode hadn't changed. The first thing I searched was her messages. There it was. Jack. I opened the conversation. The first message I saw made my jaw tighten. I still can't stop smiling about Saturday. Another followed. That hotel was worth every risk. Then another. Next time we won't have to rush. I kept scrolling. They had planned the hotel days in advance. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't alcohol. It wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. I thought that was the worst part. I was wrong. I opened another conversation, then another. A group chat with 3 of Bianca's closest friends. The messages went back months. At first, I couldn't believe what I was reading. She wasn't confessing. She was bragging. She joked about meeting random men while she was working late. She laughed about close calls. One message said she'd had a few one-night stands over the past several months, and that Donald, that was me, hadn't figured out a thing. Her friends cheered her on. One even wrote that she deserved to have some fun before getting old. I kept reading. Then Jack's name came up again. Bianca admitted he wasn't like the others. She told her friends he had something special. She said she couldn't stop thinking about him. She even admitted that's why they kept talking after sleeping together. It wasn't just another one-night stand anymore. She wanted more. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the screen. The woman sleeping 10 feet away wasn't the wife I thought I knew. She'd been living 2 different lives, and I had only seen one of them. For a full minute, I didn't move. Then the shock wore off. I wasn't going to confront her with her own phone. I was going to make sure she could never deny what she'd done. I grabbed my phone and began copying everything. Every conversation with Jack, every photo, every hotel confirmation, every message from the group chat, every joke she made at my expense, every admission, every piece of evidence. I organized it into folders and backed it up in 3 different places. If she ever claimed I misunderstood anything, she'd have to explain her own words. The next morning, I didn't go to my office. I drove straight to a medical clinic. The nurse asked a few routine questions before handing me the paperwork. I answered every one of them. Then I sat in silence while they took blood samples and ran a full panel of STD tests. It wasn't a conversation I ever imagined having. Waiting for the results was harder than finding the messages. That thought stayed with me for days. When the call finally came, the doctor told me everything had come back clean. I thanked him, hung up, and sat quietly in my truck for a moment. At least she hadn't taken my health from me, too. Then I started making the calls that actually mattered. The first was to a divorce lawyer. The second was to a private investigator. I already know my wife cheated, I told the investigator. I don't need you to prove that. What do you need? I looked out through the windshield. I need to know if she's planning a future with him. There was a short pause. Then he answered, I'll find out. I had all the proof I needed. Now it was time to build a case she couldn't escape. The private investigator called me 4 days later. I've got something, he said. When can you meet? An hour. We met in a small office above a printing shop across town. He slid a thick envelope across the desk. I think you'll want to sit down. I'll stand. He gave me a nod and opened the envelope. The first photo showed Bianca climbing into Jack's pickup outside a coffee shop. The second showed them walking hand in hand along the marina. The third was the one that mattered most. They were kissing in broad daylight outside a small rental cabin on the edge of the lake. No hesitation, no guilt, no concern about who might see them. The investigator laid out a timeline. Since you hired me, he said, I've documented 3 meetings between them. He handed me copies of restaurant receipts, time-stamped photographs, and notes showing where they'd met each time. One of the receipts placed them at a lakeside restaurant before they headed to the cabin. Then he looked at me. There's something else. I didn't say anything. Yesterday I followed your wife to lunch. She met two of her friends. He pulled out another sheet. I couldn't hear everything, but I recorded part of the conversation. He pressed play. Bianca's voice came through clearly. Donald is dependable. He pays the bills. He works hard. One of the women laughed. So why keep sneaking around? Bianca didn't hesitate. Because dependable isn't exciting. Another voice asked, and Jack? There was a short pause. He makes me feel alive. The recording ended. I slipped the recorder back across the table. I've heard enough. Back at my office, I called my attorney. Move forward, I said. We're ready, he replied. Over the next week, I handled everything quietly. I opened a new bank account. I moved my personal savings. I secured every business record connected to my construction company. Passwords were changed. Access to financial files was updated. My accountant made copies of every important document. Nothing illegal, nothing hidden. Just protecting what I'd built before Bianca had a chance to create problems. Then my lawyer called. The paperwork is finished. Good. You want her served? I looked out my office window toward the cranes working on one of my job sites. Not yet. You have something else in mind? I do. I wanted Bianca to walk through our front door one last time believing she was still in control. I wanted every legal document signed, every account protected, every piece of evidence organized. I wasn't interested in shouting. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in ending my marriage on my terms. That Friday evening, Bianca walked into the kitchen carrying her purse. I'm grabbing dinner with the girls, she said. I looked up from my coffee. Another girls' night? She smiled without missing a beat. Don't sound so jealous. I stood and walked over to her. You'll be home late? She shrugged. Probably. I opened the front door for her. Drive safe. She kissed my cheek. I always do. I watched her SUV disappear down the road. Then I closed the door, pulled out my phone, and called a locksmith. I need every lock on the house changed, I said. I can be there in 20 minutes. He arrived exactly 20 minutes later. He looked at the front door, then at me. You want every lock changed? Everyone. He got to work without asking any questions. While he replaced the locks, I went upstairs and opened Bianca's closet. I didn't throw her things around. I didn't break anything. I folded her clothes into two large suitcases. Her shoes went into boxes. Her makeup, jewelry, and toiletries filled another bag. Everything she owned was packed neatly and placed by the front door. Then I set the dining room table. Not for dinner, for the truth. I laid everything out in order. The hotel reservation, the screenshots with Jack, the copies of the group chat where she bragged about her one-night stands, the investigator's photographs, the recording transcript, the divorce papers. Nothing was missing. Nothing could be explained away. By the time I finished, the house was quiet again. Around 11:30, my phone buzzed. Bianca had sent a short message saying dinner had run longer than expected and she'd be home soon. I read it once and put the phone back in my pocket. I already knew where she'd been. At 12:47 a.m., headlights swept across the front windows. A car door closed. Then I heard her footsteps. Her key slid into the lock. It turned once, then again. Nothing. A louder turn. Still nothing. A few seconds later came the knocking. Donald? I walked to the door and opened it. Bianca stood there with a confused smile. I think the lock's broken. No, I said calmly. It works perfectly. She frowned. What are you talking about? I changed it. The smile disappeared. You... What? I stepped aside just enough for her to see the suitcases lined up inside the hallway. Her eyes moved from the luggage to my face. Donald, come in. She walked inside slowly. The moment she saw everything spread across the dining table, she stopped. Color drained from her face. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, What is all this? I picked up the first photograph. It showed her kissing Jack outside the rental cabin. The truth. I placed it in front of her. Then another. Her holding Jack's hand. Another. The hotel confirmation. Another. Screenshots of their messages. Then I slid the copies of her group chat across the table. She stared at them. I watched her eyes move across her own words. The jokes, the lies, the messages about all the other men. The line where she called Jack different. The line where she said he had something special. She looked up at me, shaking her head. I can explain. I folded my arms. I'm listening. She took a deep breath. It started as one stupid mistake. I slid another page toward her. The messages say otherwise. She looked down. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It already had. Tears filled her eyes. I was lonely. You weren't lonely. You were always working. I was building our future. She reached across the table. I made terrible choices. You made repeated choices. It wasn't serious. I tapped the screenshots with Jack. You told your friends he was special. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Then she tried one last time. I still love you. I looked directly into her eyes. No, she blinked. No? You love what I provided? She started crying. Donald, please. I picked up the divorce papers and placed them in front of her. I filed 3 days ago. Her breathing caught. You already? Yes. She looked around the room like she was hoping someone would wake her from a nightmare. We can fix this. I shook my head. The marriage ended the night you walked through that front door laughing after sleeping with another man. Silence filled the house. I picked up the 2 suitcases and carried them outside. When I came back, Bianca was still standing exactly where I'd left her. She wasn't crying anymore. She just looked lost. I opened the front door. Your bags are outside. Donald? I won't repeat myself. She slowly picked up her purse. At the doorway, she turned around one last time. I never thought you'd actually leave me. I met her stare without raising my voice. And I never thought you'd gamble 8 years of marriage for a few nights of excitement. She lowered her head. Then she walked outside. I closed the door behind her. This time, I locked it. And I never unlocked it for her again. I thought closing the door would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, my receptionist called my office. Donald, your wife is here. My ex-wife, I corrected. She says she just wants 5 minutes. Tell her I'm in a meeting. You aren't. I am now. A minute later, I watched through my office window as Bianca walked back to her car. She didn't look angry. She looked desperate. The next week, she showed up again. This time it was outside my gym. I had just finished my workout when I saw her leaning against her SUV. She stepped toward me. Donald, please. I kept walking. She followed. I've been trying to call you. I know. You blocked me. I did. She stood in front of me, forcing me to stop. I started therapy. I looked at her. I hope it helps. You don't even care? I cared for 8 years. Tears filled her eyes. It was only physical. I shook my head. No, she frowned. What do you mean? It wasn't only physical. She looked confused. You lied for months. You laughed about it with your friends. You humiliated me behind my back. You called another man special. I took one step closer. None of that is just physical. She couldn't answer. I walked past her and drove home. A few weeks later, the private investigator called me one last time. I figured you'd want the update. What happened? Jack's gone. What do you mean? He ended it. Just like that? Just like that. I had kept him on to confirm there was no continued contact that could complicate the case. The investigator explained that Jack had never wanted a relationship. He enjoyed the attention, the excitement, nothing more. Once Bianca started talking about spending more time together, he disappeared. He stopped answering her calls, blocked her number, deleted his social media, vanished. That evening, one of Bianca's friends called me. I almost didn't answer. When I did, she sounded uncomfortable. I thought you should know. Know what? Bianca isn't doing well. I stayed quiet. She keeps saying she threw away the only man who ever truly loved her. I didn't respond. The woman sighed. I told her she should have thought about that before. So did I. I ended the call. A month passed, then another. The divorce moved through the court exactly as my attorney expected. Every piece of evidence mattered. The screenshots, the investigator's report, the timeline, her own messages. There was nothing to argue, nothing to deny. One afternoon, Bianca approached me outside the courthouse after another hearing. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Donald. I stopped. She swallowed hard. If I could go back. You can't. I know. I'd do anything. I looked at her for a long moment. No. She frowned. No? What? No, you wouldn't. She stared at me. If you would have done anything. I paused. You would have stayed faithful the first time. She lowered her eyes. There was nothing left to say. I walked to my truck, started the engine, and left. I never looked back. The divorce was finalized a little over 6 months after I found the truth. It ended the way my attorney said it would. Everything I had built before the marriage stayed mine. My construction company wasn't touched. My investments stayed protected. There were no long courtroom battles because there was nothing Bianca could challenge. The evidence spoke for itself. When the judge signed the final order, I stood, thanked my attorney, and walked out. It wasn't the happiest day of my life. It was simply the day I got my life back. There was only one thing left to do: sell the house. Every room reminded me of someone who had never really been there. The kitchen where we'd planned vacations. The living room where she'd smiled at me after lying to my face. The front door where she'd walked in laughing after spending the night with another man. I didn't want to make new memories there. I listed the house the following week. It sold faster than I expected. I packed what belonged to me, loaded my truck, and rented a house on the other side of town, just a few minutes from one of my biggest construction projects. A fresh place, a fresh routine, no ghosts. Months passed. Work kept me busy. I started fishing again on weekends. I spent more time with my brother and a few old friends I'd neglected while trying to save a marriage that wasn't worth saving. Life became quiet, the good kind of quiet. One Saturday afternoon, I stopped at a grocery store on my way home. As I turned into one of the aisles, I heard someone quietly say my name. Donald. I looked up. It was Bianca. She looked different. She'd lost weight. The confidence she'd carried for so long was gone. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she gave a tired smile. I heard you moved. I did. I'm glad business is doing well. Thank you. She looked down at the shopping basket in her hands. I think about what I did every day. I didn't answer. She took a slow breath. I threw everything away. Yes, I said calmly. You did. A tear rolled down her cheek. I don't expect forgiveness. That's good. Do you hate me? I thought about the question for a second. No. She looked surprised. I don't hate you. What do you feel? Nothing. She closed her eyes for a moment. I deserved that. I adjusted the grocery bag in my hand. I hope you learn from it. I already have. I gave a small nod. I hope so. Then I walked past her. She didn't call my name again. She didn't ask me to stay. She knew there wasn't anything left to save. People sometimes ask me if I regret filing for divorce so quickly. My answer is always the same. No. Because the marriage didn't end when I handed Bianca those papers. It ended the moment she walked through our front door laughing after spending the night with another man. She thought she'd come home with a secret. Instead, she walked into the last chapter of our marriage. Losing Bianca wasn't the hardest part of my life. Living a lie would have been. Walking away wasn't weakness. It was self-respect. And looking back now, I'd make the same decision every single time. Thank you for watching.